I applied for a job with Shell Lubricants. And of course, when I did apply for it, during the interview process, they told me about you would need to be like technical and have the background. But they also told me that I was female and that I was young. And those were the two things that were going against me. And I'm like, well, I can't really change those things.
My guest this week is Sanya Mathura. Sanya has a bachelor's degree in electrical and computer engineering and a master's degree in engineering asset management, both of these from the University of West Indies. She is the founder and CEO of Strategic Reliability Solutions Limited. She's the first registered machinery lubricant engineer with the Board of Engineering in Trinidad and Tobago, and she's also an author and the editor of the amazing series Empowering Women in STEM. Sanya, welcome to STEM with Mr. N.
Thank you so much for having me, Stuart. And I always love talking to you, no matter what time of the day or night it is. I always love talking to you.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I appreciate you giving up some of your time to do this interview. So, my first question is going to be in the introduction there, I mentioned that you're a machinery lubricant engineer. What is a machinery lubricant engineer?
So it's something that I didn't know existed when I was growing up. So imagine that you eventually get into a career where you didn't know it was, something to do. Even when, growing up, you didn't hear about it. And that's why I love what you are doing because you're bringing so much awareness to all of these different fields and all of these different things. So in my field, what I do is that I try to help machinery or different types of equipment run a little bit better, run a little bit faster, a little more efficient. And most of the times, there are issues that happen. And sometimes it's usually the lubricant that causes that issue, or the lubricant could be the thing that actually gives the heads up to say something is going on in the equipment. But kind of similar to a doctor or somebody who deals with blood and you get back your blood test results and you're like, oh my gosh, these values are so high, I don't know what to do. I will help you to interpret what is on your reports and what that means for your equipment. So it's really about monitoring the health of your machinery, making sure that it runs the way it's supposed to run. And a lot of times, especially in my field, I get called in when something goes wrong. So, when something goes wrong, it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? And it's always in terms of troubleshooting, trying to figure out how it went wrong, why it went wrong, stop it from going wrong again in the future. And so it kind of encompasses a lot of different types of engineering. So even though I have the background in electrical and computer engineering, and I may not be exactly in that field right now, it kind of set the tone for what I am doing right now and that's the great thing about anything in STEM is that with STEM subjects, they give you that foundation and you can pivot. And even if you don't have a STEM background, you can get into it. And it also helps you to pivot and also helps you to, be open to so many different things. So it's a very different field. It's not something that you hear about every day, clearly. But it keeps the wheel running, or machinery in that case.
And what is the lubricant of machinery? I mean, I know what the lubricant of machinery is, but there might be people watching who aren't
Right.
aware what it is. So, what is the lubricant of
So
machinery?
everybody knows what a car is. Let's start there, right? So your cars, usually when you carry your car in for maintenance, you have to change the oils. And they tell you that the oils are getting dark, so it's not good anymore. And if you don't change the oil, it could damage your engine. You have so many other pieces of machinery throughout the entire world, throughout different applications, like in power generation, in hydraulics, in steam turbines, in boats, in, all of these trucks. Everything needs oil to run. basically, if it moves, it needs to be lubricated because there's some level of friction involved there. So the lubricant plays a very important and a vital role to everything in your industry, like even your machinery that makes paper or any of those things. Once you get into manufacturing, there's a lot of oil involved there. So once it moves, it needs oil, and you need to be monitoring that. And if you don't monitor it, you can go into some problems, similar to if you don't do that with your car. Like if you don't change your oil on time, you start getting problems with the car. Yeah, nobody wants to go into problems.
You said it was a career that you weren't aware of when you
No.
were growing up. So when did you actually become aware of the fact that lubricant engineer was a
Ah,
thing?
I love that you asked that question. So I applied for a job with Shell Lubricants. And of course, when I did apply for it, during the interview process, they told me about you would need to be like technical and have the background. But they also told me that I was female and that I was young. And those were the two things that were going against me. And I'm like, well, I can't really change those things. So, and then the guy's like, yes, we know that, but it can definitely work for you. We see you, being able to adapt in the industry. And I'm like, yes, I want to, see where this goes. I'm very interested in it. And then I just sort of dove headfirst into it. And, they got me trained and all of that. And that's when I found out more about lubrication and going out into industry, that's where I realized that lubrication connects everything, every single little thing. And it plays a huge part in terms of reliability. So that's when I started to become a lubrication engineer. So that's where it started when I started my career in that field. But before that, I was doing some stuff in electrical and computer engineering for a little bit. But then this opportunity arose, and I was like, oh, this sounds interesting. And, fairly early on in my career, and it was very eye-opening, very interesting to get into that field because it's a very niche field, but it's a field that changes a lot and has so many things going on with it. So I absolutely love it.
And it's quite incredible hearing that you were told that being female
Yes,
and being young was
yes,
actually counting against you.
it was.
But since then, you've obviously completely gone
Mm.
against what they were
Oh, yeah,
expecting.
sure.
As I said in the introduction, the first registered machine lubricant engineer with the Board of Engineering in Trinidad
Yep.
and Tobago. And that's not the first female, that is just the
Yeah.
first
First
machinery
person.
lubricant
Yeah.
engineer registered. And then I know there's a global course that you're the only female
Yep.
instructor on. So
Mhm.
how does it feel to have completely gone against their expectations and being a mold breaker in that industry?
I think once, it's very nice that we can have different types of representation. And it was interesting to me. I mean, obviously, getting into engineering, I know it's not a heavily dominated female environment. So I was accustomed to, not having as many females around. But getting into the specialty of lubrication engineering and then realizing we have no females in certain places, that's when I'm like, okay, well, I could do something about this. I could definitely change it. I'm not going to be the only person. I'm going to be the first, but I'm going to be the one opening the door for everybody else to come into it because that's what it's about. It's about getting more people involved in the industry because I will not be here forever. And I need to make sure that others can come in and, we have that sort of representation. And like you said, the Board of Engineering in Trinidad and Tobago, they did not recognize lubrication engineering as an engineering field. And when I applied for my license, they were a bit torn in between what category to put me in because my bachelor's is electrical and computer. So they wanted to put me in electrical. And then my master's is in engineering asset management, which is mechanical engineering. So they were a bit torn in between, like, where do we put you? And then they called me up and they were like, we're going to create an entire new field for you because we see the work that you've been doing in lubrication engineering. We understand now that it is recognized internationally. And there is a certification. It's called from the ICML, International Council of Machinery Lubrication. And they have a certification called Machinery Lubrication Engineer. And I was the first person in the Caribbean to get that certification. Um, for some time, one of 10 females in the world to have that certification. And they're like, we understand that it is like a field, so we're gonna add it, and you're gonna be the first person. But yes, finally, we could get other people involved because that's really what it's about, making sure we have more people involved because, things have to turn and things have to move.
And it is great that you do a lot to get more people involved. And I
Yes.
am going to ask about that in a minute. But before we move on to that, I'd also said in the introduction that you're the founder and CEO of Strategic
Mm.
Reliability Solutions Limited. Is that just consulting and helping businesses with their lubricant engineering, or is there a lot more involved in that?
Ah, there's so much more involved in that. So the story of Strategic Reliability Solutions Limited is that while I was working with Shell Lubricants as their technical person, I was doing my master's engineering asset management. So I had to do my thesis. Of course, it's going to be on oil. Like, why not, right? And I realized that the quality of the work that I was doing wasn't that great. And that's when I decided to quit my job and just head on work on my thesis. And I started to reach out to so many different people in the industry. So like, and they were so receptive and they were so, helpful. And I'm like, wow, we have such great people in our industry. Like, wouldn't it be a great thing if there was a hub for all of these people, like these specialty people, and we could have one place to have all of these different types of reliability solutions because reliability encompasses so many different things like condition monitoring, root cause analysis, all of these, spin-offs of it to get things to work properly. But it would be great if we had a hub for everything together, and it should be a strategic reliability solution. So that's how the name came about. And I partner with global affiliates in different areas of asset management. So while I am the expert in the lubrication part, I have others who handle different parts of the equipment, the vibration or asset management or root cause analysis or any of those maintenance planning and scheduling, all of these great things that you need to have that go hand in hand with reliability. So in my business we do a lot of training, a lot of consulting, and it's really about making sure that we find the solution to whatever problem the customer is facing because most of the times they're facing a problem.
And it's great that they have somebody there who has all the
Yes,
skills required and anyone in their team required to help them solve these
definitely.
issues and come up with their solutions for them. And something else that you're coming up with the solution for is
Hmm.
about empowering women in STEM. And I'd mentioned
Hmm.
in the introduction that you are the editor of the book series Empowering
Right.
Women in STEM, of which the third book's just come
Yes,
out and the fourth
just
book is
launched
on the
today.
way. So, well, huge congratulations on publication day. But can you tell everybody a wee bit about the Empowering Women in STEM books and
Hmm.
what the aim of these is?
Oh boy. So I wrote my first technical book during COVID because I'm like, I need to make sure that this information gets out there. And after I wrote the book, I did another book and then another book, but those were all technical. And I had the publisher at CRC Press approach me and she asked me, she's like, do you want to lead a book about women in STEM? I'm like, absolutely not. I have no time. This is not gonna work. And then I'm like, I thought about it over the night and I'm like, I need to do this. I need to make sure that people have a platform for it. And part of my conditions with her was that the book is not going to be about bashing guys. We're going to have the guys involved because we have to work together. Yes, it's about empowering women in STEM, but this is not a feminist book. It's not like hardcore. This is all it's about. It's about working together. And that's what it's always been about because I think that's something that people get a bit, they get that part disrupted a bit in terms of when they start hearing about women in STEM, but it's always about and always will be about everybody working together because STEM has no gender. And that's one of the great things about what we work in, that, they have so many different things going on. And we need everybody on board because we need all of the different skills, all of the different, qualities to get to where we need to be. So definitely it's about sharing the stories about people who have been in different STEM roles. And the book is global. You were an author for the second book. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And one of the things that I love about it is that we have people sharing how they got into their STEM profession. And it's not always the clear cuts, you know, I did this and I did that and I did the next. It's one of the trends that I've actually seen is that people pivoted so many different times to different things, to different areas. But in some cases, they stayed in STEM. And in some cases, most of the cases with engineering, a lot of the women left after about 5 years. And to me, like I've known about it, but only after talking to a lot more people within the industry, I realized how prevalent it was. And it's something that we need to change because we're losing our female engineers. And it's not a good thing when you have so much knowledge invested over time and then somebody leaves the industry or they leave that part of it and we can't get that knowledge back into the industry because that's the only way we're going to move forward. We need to have the knowledge there. We need to have the people there. So the premise of these books is really to get more people involved in STEM, not just women, but guys as well. Because a lot of times the guys are like, I want to help, I want to be an ally. I want to know what I can do. But at the same point in time, they don't know what women would face or how they would react to certain situations or what they deal with on a daily basis because they're not in their shoes or they don't think that way or they would not be addressed in certain manners. So this book is really not just for women. It's for women to share their stories, to, tell other women, you can do it as well. But it's also an insight for the guys to say, this is how you can help. These are the red flags that you need to look out for. When you start seeing that happen in the workplace, that's what's going on. It's not just something where just, okay, well, moving on to the next, you know it's, an eye-opening thing for both men and women. And the aim is really to get more people involved because STEM is where we change the world.
No, I agree, and it was a privilege to be part of the
Yeah.
series in book two and sharing my story because it was
Mm-hmm.
a female that really encouraged me into
Yes.
STEM. So it was great to be able to share that story. But it's also, the book's a great way to introduce people to different careers and different journeys
Yes.
that are out there, like we've been doing with this interview.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a nice chance to actually jump back a bit into your past and find out,
Oh
where
boy.
did your interest in STEM come from?
I think I've always been interested in just figuring out how things work because that's how my mind works. Like I need to figure out how it works, how it ticks, like why, how, and I think that natural curiosity is something that we see a lot in STEM careers. And, there are two different versions of STEM. There's the STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths. And then there's STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. So the arts are involved as well because the arts are very creative and you can't have those hard sciences without having that little bit of creativity because they work hand in hand. So that's the thing about STEM, and I think encouraging the younger generation in terms of finding out what they're interested in, finding out, what motivates them, how do they think about certain things, how do they dissect that in their mind, because that's going to help them moving forward, especially if they want to, pursue a career in STEM, even if they're not in STEM, like you can still get involved because I think STEM is all around us. Like you can't not touch STEM if you exist in this planet.
Yes, and that's something I say to the children in my class all
Oh
the time
yeah.
is that STEM is everywhere, even in the
Hmm.
classroom, the table
It
that they're
is.
sitting at had to be designed,
Yes.
materials had to be studied, it had to be built, there's
Hmm.
all of that has gone into it.
Everything, every single thing.
So obviously we'd said earlier about you knew that there weren't a lot of females in engineering, and
Hmm.
then from the book you said that you've learned that a lot of females have actually left engineering in the first few years. How is the landscape within engineering changing? Is it moving
Hmm.
in the right direction with more females coming through, or is there still a bit of a struggle there?
I love that question so much because I'm actually preparing for a presentation that we're talking about in Australia about getting more women involved in asset management. And when you look at the stats for Australia, it's very interesting because to begin with, their engineering population is very small, like tiny compared to, the entire population. And then when you drill down into the amount of women involved, it's even lower. But they are seeing increases in it. And I think because we're having programs like similar to what you're doing, similar to what, we start seeing a lot more people talking about, getting women involved and getting them interested in STEM and in engineering, like that's where it starts. So while globally, and like I've done this study in the Americas, I've done this in the UK, you are seeing more women getting involved. There's still a huge gap to get more women involved. And the thing is that, and it sounds weird, you're always going to have a little bit of an imbalance because while you have, and this is just like speaking to engineering itself, engineering is not the friendliest place to be. I'm trying to put this as nicely as I can. It's not the friendliest place to be because it may be a toxic environment because there's a lot of, alpha, stuff going on in there, top down, deadlines, stress, all of these things. And while we think, oh my gosh, this is so, not a great environment for women, it's not a great environment for men either. Like when you think about it, some of the women, they're like, okay, well, I can't break through the barrier. I'm doing so much, but I can't get recognized. I can't get promoted. I'm going to shift to another field where I feel valued and I can make a difference and I can make an impact. Some of the guys don't get that option. And this is the part that we don't talk about. This is the part that we forget about. And a lot of the guys, and we're seeing it now, they are struggling with emotional intelligence, shallow relationships, a lot of things in terms of they're always burnt out, highly stressed. And I see a lot of people now, they're now starting to talk about it a little bit online. But one of the authors for the second book, actually, she was talking about that in her PhD when she started interviewing men and women in engineering. She was getting feedback about that. A lot of men felt that it is a toxic environment for them as well, but nobody's talking about it. Nobody is giving them that listening ear because they're like, you're a guy, you need to deal with it. You need to make sure you stay in that engineering role, you know. But it's 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 harmful to both our guys and our girls. So, something to think about.
So it sounds like from what you're saying that there actually needs to be a bit of a culture shift in
Mhm.
engineering to try and stop it being a toxic environment for both women and
Yeah.
men. And that toxic environment will obviously be one barrier, but what are some of the other barriers that women perceive to entry into engineering?
Oh boy, how much time do we have?
Probably not enough to cover them all.
So I think like there are lots of different barriers because we start off with, first of all, them being the only female in the room. And just being the only female in the room it can cause different reactions in the room, in that a lot of the guys have never been in this environment before. They've never had to, I would say, tone down their behavior or use less industrial language in their talks to each other because there's a female in the room. So this is new territory for them. They're still navigating all of that. So that's one of the barriers. So they feel uncomfortable in the room by having a female, and sometimes it may come off as aggression when it's really not. It's just that they just don't know what to do, you know? And it's something that, we don't think about as well. The guys are having issues too, just not just the woman. But with the woman, them being uncomfortable of being in the room. There are some activities that you have after work, you have bonding activities. People are going out on the golf course, they're going down, you know, on the yacht, and it may not be the best activities for women to partake in. So they feel left out because they can't go to those activities, or they can't go drinking out with the boys because they're not drinkers, or that's not part of their culture. So they feel excluded in those environments. So that's one of the main barriers as well. Another one is just having that, I would say, mentorship and somebody to advocate for them. Because a lot of times within the organization, to get promoted or to be, seen for another role or for, a different role, they need to have an advocate. And a lot of times they don't have that advocacy. They don't have a group to help them to say, okay, well, this is what you want to do. This is how we plan to get there. This is what we're going to help you to, reach your goals. Or have that other industry advocates where they can say, okay, well, I've seen this role and I know this person. Let me talk to them about you. Let me talk to them about, or let me help you to get the skills that you need, that particular skill set to be ready or to be, competent for that job. Because it's not that they're not competent, it's just that they may not know. And they may not have, the access to the resources. So access to resources, access to mentorship, you know, having people advocate for them. And that's a huge one because that's where we could all help, you know, everybody could play a part in that one. Another thing is, and this is gonna sound totally weird, having, you know, having resources available to women who are breastfeeding or who are in that phase, because a lot of times in the heavy industrial environment, they don't have a space to do that. And it's difficult for them when they're in that phase and they can't, it puts them in a position where they're like, okay, I'm gonna have to leave the industry because I can't, take care of my family, or I can't do my duties or things like that, or even the longer hours that they have to work. Like if it's not flexible for them, they feel pressured in the fact that they have their families and they can't, actually give them the time that they need. So they may switch to another profession or they may switch to another industry that gives them the flexibility. So that's another barrier entry point. I mean, I could talk about this for a long time, but I'm gonna keep it simple and to the point.
Yeah, no, those are certainly some of the ones that I would have thought
Yeah.
would have been the key ones. And
Mm-hmm.
it's incredible that you've done these studies in various countries around the world and you're seeing
Yeah.
the same thing there. So it shows it's not, a specific issue for a specific country.
Yeah.
But that's also why it's great that you're out here as an advocate and a role model for women to see that, you can be in that
Mm-hmm.
industry, the engineering industry, you can be successful. And as I said earlier, you've been quite a mold breaker in some of the things that you've done and achieved as the first
Thank you.
female doing them. But now I've got an interesting question for you
Ah.
because I've spoken to a few different female engineers,
Mm-hmm.
and like, I've spoken to some who talk about the fact that they are a female engineer
Mm-hmm.
or a woman in engineering. But then I've also spoken to some who've said, I am not a woman in engineering, I am an engineer.
Ah.
What's
Mm-hmm.
what's your take on it? Are you a woman in engineering or are you an engineer? How do you put yourself across?
I always say I am a woman in engineering because just because it is underrepresented. And I want to make sure that people know that we have more women involved. And that's one of the main reasons that I always say I'm a woman in engineering. I am a female engineer. And I make that distinction because sometimes people don't realize how rare it is to have women in engineering. And that simple add-in in saying that, it makes them think, oh wait, why does she have to say that? Or why isn't she just an engineer? No, there's a distinction, there's a difference, and that is why we're trying to get more people involved. When we get to 50%, I can say, I'm just an engineer. Yeah, that's it. Because we've broken that barrier. But until we get there, I'm a female in engineering.
No, and that's a very fair point because it's something that we don't really say about other
Mm-hmm.
professions. So, like, my wife
Yes,
doesn't say I'm a female doctor, and I
right,
don't say I'm a male primary teacher.
right.
It's just
Mm-hmm.
you state it, but that's a very fair point about representation. And unfortunately, this is where we're going to have to end because we
Oh
have covered a
no.
lot of ground. But since we're talking about representation and getting stories out there, can you tell everyone where they can get access to the Empowering Women in STEM book series?
Oh, yes, definitely. It's available on Amazon. So first place to check, you check Amazon. It's also available in Barnes and Nobles. It's available on CRC Press. So what I would encourage you to do, it's also available on my website, strategicreliabilitysolutions.com. And Stuart, I'll probably just send you a link so you can put a link in there so it's easy for people to find. But this third book is very interesting. It's the first time we had so many authors, so many different stories. A lot of them heavily based in engineering, but we also have a few guys in there that, they brought their thoughts on it, and it was very interesting to see where they came from in terms of their story and how they wanted to help more women in engineering and things that they have realized about the industry. Because we have an HR professional that talks about why women interview better than men, which is very interesting. Like when I read the chapter, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But I'm not gonna give away any of the tips and tricks for that one. You have to, get it in the book. But the book actually launched today, 16th of June. So very interesting things going on with it. You can get it on Kindle as well. So, it's available in any format that you want.